Take a moment to settle and relax in place. Take a deep breath in and let it out. Welcome to a breath of fresh air. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be taking you through a curator's tour for you to gain a deeper understanding of the artists and artworks in relation to my thesis concept. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'll first begin by asking you, how do you find serenity in times of distress? What is your breath of fresh air? For some, it could have been going outside for walks or finding a new creative outlet. After I moved back to Sault Ste. Marie in March 2020 due to COVID, I found that taking long walks in nature gave me a sense of stability and solitude from the world, even if it was just for a moment and just for an hour. Yet people in larger cities, such as Toronto, may not have had the opportunity to experience nature due to health and safety protocols. Though lockdowns stop people from accessing wildlife outdoors, who's to say we cannot create beauty within our own interior spaces? For three artists in Sault Ste. Marie, Samantha Pine-Bennett, Desiree Watson, and Shannon McLeod, reconnecting back to themselves and nature became their source of healing, connection, and hope during the pandemic. So let's start with Samantha Pine-Bennett. Samantha Pine-Bennett is a multidisciplinary Anishinaabe artist who is currently finishing her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Algoma University in Sault Ste. Marie. She explores a variety of media within her creative practice, including painting, printmaking, collage, and installation. Often within her own work, themes of identity are collaged together with her perceptions of time, space, memory, and sensation. Her installation, Shadows of the Broken Earth, shows how nature can be gathered and reconfigured to be a space for mourning and remembrance. For her thesis project, she chose to reflect on the internal struggle of being an Anishinaabe student at Algoma University while knowing of its extensive history as the Shinwak residential school for almost 100 years. Active from 1872 to 1970, the school also bore the same name as her ancestor, Chief Shinwakans. For Pine-Bennett, the first step in processing the intergenerational trauma felt within her own family was by walking on the same land where it all started. Near to the university, she found the pathways in the forest to be a quiet space to ruminate on these difficult histories. She began to think about time, space, and memory while photographing the shifting patterns and shadows of the trees. She also gravitated towards picking up things, such as pieces of trash, clumps of leaves, decomposed sticks, or bits of fungus that she viewed as purposeful junk. In her final installation, Pine-Bennett incorporates all of her found objects and collaged images of nature as extensions of her experience in the forest. She also created ink drawings of the foliage made from dried plants she collected while traversing the wooden paths. Pine-Bennett took inspiration from the depiction of cloth and classical still life paintings to recreate a sense of protection within her own constructed landscape. Underneath the layers of broken branches and luminous fabrics lies a silhouette of the artist herself in the center of the projected image. Her presence within the installation could also signify the generations of her people who have looked upon the same landscape for solace in troubled times. The artist stands as a witness, while at the same time invites us to step into the frame to see history through her eyes. The tattered objects and decaying materials in the installation are reminiscent of stories that have been lost, forgotten, or left behind. They can also be seen as remnants of colonial wounds and memories that still linger into the artist's life. Shadows of the Broken Earth is truly a reflection of her journey, gathering up the broken parts of her ancestral heritage to find healing and start anew. Though history cannot be undone, Pine-Bennett's installation emphasizes that the memory of those we love will never fade away. In this time of immense loss and tragedy, how do we cope with the reality of losing over 2 million people to COVID-19? Though we may not fully comprehend the events of this past year, never have I seen a world in desperate need of more compassion and empathy. Sometimes the best we can do is create spaces like Shadows of the Broken Earth to remember the lives that were cut short and left unfinished. Maybe nature can offer some solace when our lives quickly change in a blink of an eye. Like we see in Pine-Bennet's installation, life endures even when the pain of the past can leave us stuck in a state of disarray and hopelessness. Therefore, Shadows of the Broken Earth reminds us that nature meets us in our brokenness and can provide a resting place for us to heal. All right, next we'll look at Desiree Watson. Desiree Watson is an interdisciplinary multimedia artist who has been experimenting with land-based practices such as creating ceramics from local clay, homemade inks, and nature installations. She is currently interested in exploring the purpose, power, and celebration of beauty within her artistic practice. Her deep connection with the natural environment inspired her to create a nature-themed table-setting series called Feasting on Beauty. This past December, she decided to buy a multitude of flowers from the grocery store and display them on her dining room table to integrate a touch of brightness amidst the cloudy winter days. She also makes Flora the centerpiece of her installation to pay tribute to an ancient Chinese proverb. If you have but 2 pennies left, buy a loaf of bread with one and a flower with the other. Watson believes that feeding oneself with food is just as important as nourishing one's soul with beauty. Passed on from the farmers to the grocers, Watson becomes the next preserver of these flowers that have been grown in different parts of the world. In this installation, she displayed lilies, carnations, jaberas, miniature roses, and alstroemerias on dining ware and handmade ceramics that she produced from local clay. Thus, Feasting on Beauty is not only a celebration of life, but also an assembly of cultures. Even though we cannot gather together to share a meal, there are still connections being made when beauty is given from one corner of the world to the next. Therefore, each of the flowers within Watson's installation suggests the multiple cultures and caretakers of the land that contributed to her artwork. Although flowers in Feasting on Beauty can be a sign of new life and regeneration, they also have a history of symbolizing the precious time we have on this earth. According to Celeste Brzezinski, a specialist in art from the Dutch Golden Age, artists from the Netherlands during the 17th century first began creating floral still life paintings called vanitas to engage a concern with mortality and the fragility of human life, its pleasures, passions, possessions, and ambitions. Even when the familiar has been stripped away from us this past year, like nature, we have continued to prevail throughout the seasons of joy and hardship. Moreover, Watson makes space to celebrate the small blessings that are still blooming in the midst of brokenness. Though the pictures of feasting on beauty capture an abundant moment in time, eventually the flowers must wilt and return back into the earth to begin the process again. The reincarnation of a flower can also reflect the missing parts of ourselves that still hold the possibility of possessing something beautiful and unexpected. Watson asks us to consider, how do we feast? How do we feed our souls and focus on healing? As we continue to face the loneliness that comes with self-isolation, feasting on beauty encourages us to cultivate a newfound companionship by dining with nature. As we eagerly await the day when the pandemic becomes a distant memory, perhaps we can look back to thank nature for never leaving our side. All right, and now we'll move on to Shannon McLeod. After working as a hospice nurse for over 40 years, Shannon McLeod has found working with clay to be an ongoing personal adventure during retirement. Her interest in history, spirituality, and traveling has greatly influenced her creative practice. Through the process of shaping local clay into meditative objects, McLeod seeks to connect with the land and ponder the meaning of our existence on Earth. She has also come to see the process of shaping and firing of clay as a reflection of our own personal journeys. She expresses that pottery has become a tactile spiritual process, inviting me to play with earth, fire, and water, adding my own breath as I deeply ponder our evolving human history. McLeod uses local clay to explore concepts of spirituality, astrology, and geological evolution. Her earthenware ceramics in the exhibition also offer a new approach for coping with stress during the pandemic. She fills each of the ceramics with rocks from the shores of Lake Superior as another way of connecting herself back to the earth. Through slab work and hand building, McLeod's collection of meditational ceramics are exquisitely crafted and fired to embody their own visual character. The outer surface of the rain stick shows an array of rough and smooth textures. A thin translucent layer of gold and pink pigments cover the numerous spiral clusters of nailheads embedded into the object. The bronze and black threads embellished with multicolored glass beads on each side of the ceramic also complement the harmonious display of color and texture on its outward appearance. Moreover, McLeod refers to the rain stick as a Shimpa meditation tool that can be used to conduct a 4-step introspection called RAIN to deal with difficult emotions. Developed by mindfulness teacher Michelle McDonald, the acronym RAIN stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Non-Identification. As we listen to the pebbles lightly cascade back and forth within the rain stick, McLeod encourages us to take a moment to nurture ourselves before entering back into the world. When held in our hands, the sacred meditation rattles and the sphericon also function as vessels to center ourselves within the present moment. McLeod uses different textured rollers to create the curvilinear patterns on the surfaces of the rattles. The sandy-colored one was fired in her electric kiln to generate a pure bare exterior, and the other 2 rattles were pit-fired in order to produce a dark and achromatic aesthetic. Similar to the rain stick, the beaded bracelets adorned around each of the rattles add another layer of earthly tones. The spiral designs also resemble the shape of the finger labyrinth engraved on the top of the sphericon. McLeod first came across this ancient contemplative practice of walking along a labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral during her trip to France. According to medieval historian and world spirituality scholar Dr. Karen Rails, the center of a labyrinth was akin to a still cosmic point of peace, where peace, spiritual reconciliation, and healing would be more likely to take place. McLeod also believes that clay possesses a grounding, eternal energy and can be seen as a metaphor for the human journey. She created this ceramic in the form of a sphericon, a mix between a circle and a square, to represent our personal and collective transformations as we move into a new astrological era. She truly believes that it is a privilege to be alive in this moment of time, when the transition from the age of Pisces to Aquarius could symbolize a newfound creative and spiritual awakening for human civilization. Through soul-searching and working with clay, McLeod has learned how to accept and trust the process within this turning point of human history. Though the sphericon resembles the twists and turns we will face on this new path, the artist articulates that the key idea of the sphericon for me is that by uniting with the circle, it moves from the static state of the square into an entity that, although wobbly, could then begin to move forward on its own. Furthermore, McLeod's sphericon reminds us that the strength needed to persevere comes with changing our outlook, envisioning the future to be a pathway marked with infinite possibilities. Looking back, I find that each of the artists have given me a new perspective on thriving during hardship. Being in Sault Ste. Marie gave me a different view on home and connection and what it means to live. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise, since I was able to reconnect back with my family, the beauty within my city, and look within to take care of my physical and mental well-being. Though this past year has had its challenges, I think it made me much more resilient and reflective. As for my acknowledgements, this exhibition would not have been possible without the contributions of the artists. Special thanks to Samantha Pine-Bennett, Desiree Watson, and Shannon McLeod for the opportunity to work with you, showcase your art, and share your story. I am deeply grateful for Andrea and Francisco for their continuous guidance, insight, and encouragement throughout the development of my capstone project. I also wish to acknowledge my colleagues in my thesis class for your enthusiasm, engagement, and feedback. Last but not least, thank you to my family for believing in my vision and supporting me through it all. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'm excited to see everyone else's final presentations as well. Take care.